Hi boys and girls. Do you like to listen to stories? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Stories with Enike. That's me. I'm Enike. And welcome to our home. If you're ready, we'll head right to the storyboard. Boys and girls, I'm going to pause here for just a moment. This baby who was born in Bethlehem was a very, very special baby. There has been no other child ever born who was announced by angels except for Jesus' cousin John. These angels came to the shepherds, they shouted and they sang for joy because Jesus was a very special baby. Jesus would grow up to be the Savior of the world. Now, he wasn't going to be a Savior who would save them from a king or from a ruler that was evil. Jesus was a Savior who would save people from all their sins. And if you don't know what sins are, those are all the bad things we do, all the really bad things, even the little bad things. And those are the things that we have to talk to God about. And when Jesus came, he was the one who had the chance to say, I forgive you. Our story is going to continue in a country far, far, far away to the east. There were people who lived there who spent their days studying the stars, and they learned many, many things. And one day, one of them came running in very, very excitedly. He had found a very special star, a big star. It shone brighter than all the other stars. Well, the men put their heads together and they said, this must have a very special meaning. We're going to have to go to our library and find out if there's going to be a special event sometime in history. So they did that. They didn't have computers in those days. They couldn't go to Google. They had to go to books. And so they looked and they searched, and finally these men who did not worship God, who didn't have anything to do with God because they worshipped other gods, they turned to the scriptures, all the stories of the Old Testament. And wouldn't you know it, they found the book of Isaiah that had prophesied a child shall be born to a virgin and will be called Emmanuel. Well, they said, we need to go and find this child because he must be a very special child, and we will travel until we find him. And so these men set out. Now, modern stories and modern songs say that there were 3 wise men, but the Bible doesn't say how many there were. What we do know is that they were magicians. They worked in the courts of their kings, and so they would travel. They would look very, very kingly. They would have beautiful, expensive clothing, and their camels would be decked out with jewels and gold and beautiful velvet fabrics. And so these men, and we'll have 3 of them today, traveled through the desert. And as they traveled, they said, they had their books with them, and they said, it must be the city of Jerusalem, because that is the capital city of where the Jews live. And so that's where we'll go. These men traveled for days and days and days and days, maybe even months, through the desert until they finally came to see the outside of the city of Jerusalem. Long after the events in Bethlehem had passed, Mary and Joseph had gone back to their own home. The wise men finally arrived in the city of Jerusalem. After they entered the gates, they inquired of the people, how do we find our way to the palace? Well, the people must have stared at this company of wealthy-looking kings, and so they pointed the direction. And at last, the company of travelers, the wise men, came to the palace of King Herod. They were met at the gate by the soldiers, and the soldier delivered their message to King Herod. Your Highness, said one soldier, there is a great company of very wealthy-looking kings outside, and they want to have audience with you. "Well," said King Herod, "I will speak with one of them. Bring him to me." So the soldier left, and he returned with one of those kings. "Tell me, sir," said King Herod, "to what do we owe the honor of this visit?" "Well," said the wise man, "we have come a long way. We have traveled for many days, and we seek he who is born the King of the Jews." Herod looked at him, and he said, "I know nothing of a king who has been born. A king of the Jews, you say?" "Yes," said the wise man. He said, "One of our company discovered a beautiful new star, a very big star. And so we went to our books and we did much studying, and we found in the scriptures, the Jewish scriptures, we found reference to a child that would be born, a very special child. And we think perhaps that very special child has been born, and we want to go and worship him." "Well," said King Herod, "I know nothing of this child, but my wise men will certainly go and look this all up. Will you come back tomorrow, and we may have more information for you?" "Certainly," said the wise man, and with that he left. No sooner had the wise man left than King Herod clapped his nasty old hands, and he said, "I want all my wise men and my learned scribes to come here. I need to know what these people are talking about. There should be no other king in this country." So his wise men went and they looked, and finally they came. "Your Highness," they said, "we have found it. We too searched through the Jewish scriptures. We too have found the information that those kings said they found. This child was to be born in Bethlehem, and he will be the King of the Jews." Herod thought and thought, and he said, "Thank you," and he sent his wise men away. Says he to himself, "this cannot be. I cannot allow it to happen. I have to have a plan." And so the next day he called his soldiers and said, "Bring that man to me again." "Yes, Your Highness. What have you discovered?" said the king. He said, "We have discovered that this child is to be born in Bethlehem. That's where you will find him. But, sir, this catches me by surprise. I did not know that there would be a child born to the Jews who would be his king. I, too, would love to worship him. When you find him, will you come back and tell me where he is so that I, too, can go and worship him?" "Well, certainly," said the wise men. "I would be happy to do that. Bethlehem, you say? Perhaps you can tell us how we can get there, and we'll be on our way." And so that man left the presence of the king. The king in his heart said to himself, "There is no way I am going to worship that child. When I find him, I'm going to kill him." By the time the wise men came to the palace in Jerusalem, Mary and Joseph had returned home. The Bible doesn't tell us how old Jesus was when they finally reached their house, but that does say that the wise men came and found them in his home. And so one day, Joseph came indoors and he said, "Mary, we have some very special visitors." "Bring them in," said Mary. And so in came the kings, the wise men, all of them. Maybe there were 3, maybe there were more. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. But they all came, and they all bowed down in front of Jesus, and they offered their gifts, very precious gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh, and they left many, many gifts behind, costly gifts that would be worth many, many dollars. And Mary just thought about all these things what a special child I have. Well, the wise men left, but do you think they went back to the palace? In the night, they stopped in an inn, and they were sleeping, and an angel came to one of them, and he said, "Do not go back to the palace. King Herod does not wish to worship the child. He wants to kill him. Find another way to go home." And so that's exactly what the wise men did. They listened to the voice of that angel who had spoken in the dream, and they went home in a totally different way. In the meantime, the angel came to Joseph and Mary as well as Joseph was sleeping one night. And he said, "Joseph, you have to leave your home. Take Mary and the baby and go to Egypt." And so once again, in the middle of the night even, Joseph got his wife and the baby, and they left their beautiful little home, and they went to the country of Egypt, which was very, very far away. Back in the palace, King Herod waited, not too patiently. He waited a long time, and he said to his guards finally, "Where are these kings? What has taken them so long? Send somebody out to find them." So the soldiers went out, and they searched everywhere, but they could not find the kings who had come to visit them in the palace. At last King Herod understood he had been tricked, and he was furious. "Well," he said, "I'll fix that." He said, "I want you to go to every house and find every boy child who is 2 years old and younger and kill him." And that's what happened. The soldiers went to every home in the town of Jerusalem, in all the area around, and they took those babies. They took the toddlers, they took the little 2-year-olds, and they killed them. And you know, boys and girls, that does fulfill a prophecy that had been made 700 years earlier, that in Israel there would be the sound of weeping and mourning, Rachel crying for her children and refusing to be comforted. Well, finally, Herod died, and the word came to Joseph and Mary in Egypt that it was safe for them to return. But as they were returning, an angel spoke and said, "You must know, Archelaus, the son of King Herod, has taken the throne. He is worse than King Herod." And so Joseph realized he could never go back to his old home. And he went with Mary to the area of Galilee, and he and Mary made their home in Nazareth. And therefore, that also fulfilled a prophecy that said that Jesus would be a Nazirite. Not meaning that he was going to be a Nazirite who was a very special kind of person, just that he came from Nazareth. But that had also been foretold. Well, boys and girls, that's the end of the Christmas story. It's the end of the story that explains why Jesus was born in a barn, who the wise men were, why the angels sang, but it's not the end of Jesus' story. It's only the beginning. I hope you liked these stories, and that you'll join me for the next one, which will be about Jesus growing up. I look forward to the next visit on Enika's Stories.